everybody. It's Helen Hilligs, licensed therapist, intuitive counselor, and I am here today to talk to you about sacred sexuality revealed, passionate intimacy, deeper connection, and lasting desire. And I have today the intentional relationship coach, Kyle Benson. I'm really excited to talk to him and to dive deep into some really juicy topics. And first, I want to tell you why I'm doing this summit. And that is for two reasons. One is that I had a painful sexual history myself as a young person in the 60s and 70s in the sexual revolution with promiscuity, abortion, abuse. And it took me decades to really learn to be intimate and to learn what sacred sexuality was. And I don't want that to happen to you. And the second reason is that I became a licensed therapist, and I've had many, many clients over 3.5 decades of working that have brought so many sexual issues to me and longing for the fulfillment of sacred sexuality and not knowing how to have it. So that's why I'm doing this. And I found Kyle, and I was so excited to read his website and to, get a feeling for the depth of this young man and his passion for relationships. And Kyle Benson is an intentional, intimate relationship coach, providing practical, research-based tools to build long-lasting relationships. He's best known for his compassion and non-judgmental style and his capacity to see the root problem. I love that description of you, Kyle. And I'm so passionate about that root cause too. So that is really awesome. Welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
So the first question I always ask everybody is, how do you define sacred sexuality, Kyle?
Mm-hmm. I think I think sexuality in itself is really sacred, right? There's really an erotic energy and kind of a life force that comes when we get really connected to our sexuality wholeheartedly. Kind of without that shame, without some of the stuff we'll be talking a lot more today, but just a really, right, there's almost like a spiritual component to it, right? That's really important and deeply meaningful. And I think when it comes to sexuality, when we can get in touch with that, when we can explore that, when we can kind of live in that life energy force, it's a really beautiful thing.
You brought up something very interesting that no one else has brought up, which I really appreciate, is that sexuality itself is sacred. Mm-hmm. That if you really tune into it, it's there all along. It's something you can expand, but it's already there.
Yeah, I mean, we're sexual beings, right? I mean, we're one of the few mammals in the world that gets pleasure and has sex for pleasure, right? Not just procreation, not just to have the next generation, but for sensations, for enjoyment. I mean, the diversity of sexual experiences and kinks and, things that people find pleasurable. I mean, the array is a lot. I mean, there's so much to explore in their skin, in different environments, in different positions, toys, situations. I mean, and even our fantasy life in our head, like it's so, it's so meaningful. And I think just understanding that is a really important part.
I agree. Paying attention.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So would you tell us a little bit, because that's what attracted me to you, was your own story and, your willingness to share that story with the world. And I think it's meaningful to people listening. I think they would get a lot out of it. So.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, a lot of us, at least, I think a lot of us in this field, is we come to it because it's a part we need to heal within ourselves. And that was definitely true for me. I had been had a lot of relationships, but I had a few relationships in a row that were longer than a year. And in 3 of those relationships, I ended up being cheated on. And so that was really internalized. And how I internalized that was, well, something's wrong with me, right? If I keep creating this, like it's my fault, I'm the reason, or something's fundamentally wrong with me. And so I got into this mindset that for me, for someone to love me, I had to perform. I had to buy them flowers every week. I had to buy them gifts. I had to go in debt to get them to see me worthy of their love. And when that comes into sexuality in the bedroom, right, there's a lot of performance anxiety that goes along with that. And so that's something that I had a lot of issues with, and particularly in the culture of masculinity, right? There is this, okay, you know, she better be able to have an orgasm. It's very performance based, not very what's going on based, right? It's okay, if she has an orgasm, then sex is good. If she doesn't, then I'm a bad romantic partner, which isn't true, right? But I had all these false narratives about what it meant to be a man and be a sexual being that really drove my sexuality and my relationships, and caused them to be pretty toxic, and also really constrained and really limited. You know, if you only focus on the orgasm, you're missing all the foreplay, you're missing the sensations that happen during sex, you're missing those emotional connection moments where you can be really intimate with each other. And this journey has kind of forced me to really look at that and slow down and really start to be more connected with my partner and more engaged and focus more on what happens in my body and what's going on in her body, and make this something that's a lot more meaningful rather than, okay, I got the touchdown and we're good to go.
You know, I love that. A couple of things really struck me. One of them, I think, relates no matter what your age. And I mean, I know you're 31, right? Mm-hmm. Which I absolutely am thrilled about, because it shows that, you know, the younger generations are taking this on in a serious way. And I just love that. But I wondered, when you were saying about you went in debt, you know, to prove that you were a guy worthy of being with. Don't you think that feeling that you're less than and therefore must perform at this certain level creates resentment?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. And that was not only resentment towards my partner, but resentment towards myself, right? A resentment of, oh my goodness, like I'm not good enough. And I have to, it's exhausting. It was exhausting, right? Because then I was like, okay, I got to go make extra money here, or I got to work 80 hours a week. And you know, part of what filled that, or like what I ended up doing, is I started working 80 to 100 hours per week. And I did that for about 3 months. And then if you kind of go to my website and you see a picture of me, my body had a massive reaction. And I ended up getting this autoimmune disease called psoriasis that covered me from head to toe. And when I counted it, I had like 312 spots. And that I stayed that way for about a good 12 to 13 months.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And so it was, you know, it was pretty severe. And it was kind of like my body screaming at me that something was wrong and I needed to pay attention to something. And so that was kind of my kickoff point to really dive into this field.
I love that story. And, you know, the other thing that about the call to awareness is, you knew something was wrong, I'm sure, before the psoriasis outbreak.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. I mean, right before that, I mean, I remember looking in the mirror and being like, I hate myself. Like I remember that moment. And I had been drinking to fall asleep. Like I was at that kind of low. I felt highly anxious. I felt highly insecure. I was trying to go on as many dates as possible, like hooking up with a lot of different people. And I hated all that, but that was all driven by this fear that I needed external validation to feel worthy. And that's a really unfulfilling cycle. It's a cycle you can never actually win. And
I completely agree.
Right. And this journey really forced me to go, okay, how do I start to value myself? And how do I start to get more connected with myself? And that's a part about sexuality that became much more enjoyable for me, as I started to go, what are the sensations I really want to enjoy? What are the stuff I haven't explored? And starting to own my sexuality. And that really became it's still a journey, but it's a lot more fun because I get to focus on also my needs in that too.
I just love that, because what you're really talking about too is, and the reason I wanted you to share your journey, Kyle, is it illuminates it and underscores how important it is to look at ourselves and to start with ourselves and to heal what's blocking us from having what we want. People get this idea that, if I just get the latest toy, or I know how to, just like you were saying, I've got the touchdown, so we're good to go. And, I know how to make her have an orgasm. That's all there is to it. And that's our whole society, isn't it? That instant gratification, get to the goal.
Yeah, exactly. It's very performance driven, right? Get to the next level in corporate, get to the next bonus, get to the next dollar, but it's not like so focused on this journey, right? And it's like, okay, we got to get to the orgasm, not like, oh, like what are these sensations? What if we slow down and explore different parts of our bodies and really connect? And so it really kind of takes us away from our bodies, right? It takes us away from those sensations because it focuses on the end result rather than what happens moment to moment.
I mean, the thing that's so profound about what you're saying to me is that in order to do it, you have to really confront the societal brainwashing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think there's so much, just like I shared, right? This narrative that as a man, my partner has to orgasm. Right. That puts so much pressure on me and puts a ton of pressure on her. Mm-hmm. And what we know from research, right, pressure on our sexuality makes it very hard to be in our bodies because we're focused on, oh my God, am I orgasming? Am I going to get to this place? Oh my God. Right. And all of a sudden our anxiety is ramped up and we can't actually slow down to experience what we need. We can't actually slow down to go, let me be relaxed enough to have that orgasm and let me feel connected enough, or let me get into that place that I find a lot of pleasure that then will help me get to that orgasm, right? And so I think there is this pressure we have in our society of, again, very performance goal driven, not experience driven, not moment to moment.
So 2 questions come up to me is, how does the patriarchal society that we live in damage men? That's the first one.
Yeah, it does a lot. I think, you look at kind of some of the mixed messages. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie The Mask You Live In, but they talk about men being raised in this what they call the great setup, right? We're taught that our only emotions we can show is anger. To be a man, we must, perform sexually. We must share with our friends how sexually impressive we are.
I love that.
Also, we also, we objectify not only women, but ourselves, right? And if you think about that, like some of the language that, that movie talks about is like, oh, I'm going to hit that, or I'm going to tear that up, right? And even in college, right, this frat culture and this hookup culture, it's objectifying other people. And it's really toxic. And, like when we talk about trauma in the body, right? If you're able to objectify someone else and limit them down to almost an object, what's also going on for your body, right? Because to objectify another human being, there's also some objectification of yourself in that. And that's, I think, a big part of the patriarchal messages is that to be a man, we must perform, we must be something other than what we're not. We must constantly prove our masculinity. And there's the fragility of that. And in that, there is a betrayal of the human body and kind of the sex appeal or the stuff that we go after. And it just really harms our sexuality and gets us away from kind of pleasure, in my opinion.
Well, and not just harms your sexuality, but your emotional and spiritual well-being as well. Would you say?
Oh, 100%. And I was, just even working with, teenagers, I work with a few teenage boys and we've talked about kind of masculinity, and they talk about how they never express sadness. Right. And I remember years ago when my grandma passed away, I was very, very close to her, but in the funeral, I didn't cry. And I looked at my dad and no one was crying. Like the men were not crying. There is this constraint that says men have to be this way. And it's so damaging because to be a whole human is to experience all of emotions, right? To really be in touch with that. And I think that's one of the things I'm most grateful for on this journey is that being in this work, being in this space, as you know, is we have to really focus on our emotions. We have to understand and see it as something that's useful and helpful and a guide. And so I've really had to get in touch with those parts of myself that masculinity or patriarchy has really kind of shut down and said, this is not who you should be, right? Which is inherently, even that statement should, is a shameful statement, right? It says you are not worthy as you are. And that's something that's perpetuated in our society and a lot in our sexuality.
And, you know, the way you're talking about it helps me just keep remembering that sacred sexuality is the integration. You know, it's an integrative experience. It includes your mind, your body, your spirit, your emotions, your, you know, all of it, the sensations, and what you're talking about in terms of the reduction of who you're supposed to be. Yeah. It prevents, you know, you can't have sacred sexuality if you buy into the patriarchy.
Right, exactly. And I think it's, you know, it's funny. It's, you know, to get an erection or a penis to get an erection, right? That's not hard. For a clitoris to kind of be aroused, or the, you know, the lubrication, like that's not hard, right? That stuff is pretty simple. It's pretty straightforward. What people often don't understand is it's our brain that's really our biggest sexual organ, right? That's the driver of it. That's the part that our body's going, is this safe for me to get sexual? Is this person someone I trust? You know, is this something that I find arousing? Is something I find pleasurable, right? And that's where I think in our society, we focus so much on anatomy, not on the emotional experience that people have of their sexuality. And so it is fragmented. It's, oh, my body part. No, not how does this feel for me as a whole human being? And that's a big problem.
I love that. You know, it is so true when you say we focus on the body part. It's, you know, on the technique or the toy or the, you know, methodology rather than the whole experience.
Yeah. And I think that's also too, you know, I think if we go back to the patriarchy a little bit, it's this view of sex as like that ultimate achievement, but there's so many ways of connecting with our romantic partners beyond just the bedroom. And what we know also from research is, for what's really healthy is when you have a really strong, stable, emotionally connected relationship, your sexuality tends to thrive. When you have a negative emotional environment in the relationship, when you have unresolved issues, when you don't talk about what's going on or what your needs are, your sexuality struggles, right? And if you look at the research, one of the first things that unhappy couples complain about is their sex life. But they don't think about, oh my gosh, it's probably because we don't connect. It's because we have really unhealthy fights, right? All that stuff is a part of our sexuality. And Dr. John Gottman, who's done 40 years of research of observing couples, he talks about that everything in the relationship is foreplay, right? And he's true, right? When we turn towards and emotionally connect, when we offer emotional support, when we resolve issues and we work through them and listen for each other's perspectives, we start to create this almost environment, almost like a garden, that we start to nurture ourselves and our partners, that make it so much more easier to feel comfortable in our sexuality and to explore that too. And when those are not working well, of course our sex life is going to fall apart, because that's where we are most emotionally naked, most vulnerable too.
It's so powerful, the impact of our culture of instant gratification. Mm-hmm. And what you're talking about is the opposite of instant gratification. It's the recognition that it's an effort, it's an intention, it's a process that you nurture every day, all day long. And people don't want to have to do the work. No. Do you find that with your clients, that people, I mean, I guess once they come to you or to me, it's like they have recognized that. Mm-hmm. But do you see that all over, that people don't want to do the work? They just want the instant fix?
Well, I don't know if they don't want to do the work. I think they've been convinced that the work's not really necessary, that they can have that instant gratification without doing that, right? It's been this big myth, this lie that's been put on them. And I think particularly with men, like they might complain, oh, well, everything is great in our relationship, but our sex, right? We don't have enough sex, or we don't do this. And, when you really start to look at it and we start to expand it, actually they have a lot more issues, right? And one of the things that the research shows is that 80% of the issues are usually brought up by the women. That's telling of how our culture trains men not to share what's going on. And one of the biggest complaints I get with women is, my husband is a brick wall. He doesn't share what's going on with him. Right. And all those emotions, all that stuff we've been talking about kind of get funneled into, okay, this gets released in sex. Or this is the place where as a man, I'm allowed to be more vulnerable or more intimate. Right. But if that's the only place, then your partner probably doesn't feel safe to really even engage with that as well.
That's a very interesting statistic that I have not heard, is that 80% of the issues that are brought up by women. And are you talking about sexual issues?
No.
Or just issues in the marriage or in the relationship? That is really, really fascinating. And I'm not surprised, again, from what you're describing about men are taught to be shut down emotionally. So it's like they're not gonna notice that you're having this or that issue. They're just, it's so interesting. I know a young couple who the man says all the time, I am chill, I'm just chill. I just go with the flow. I mean, whatever she wants is okay. But then every 6 months or so, he blows up.
Yep, because he bottles everything. And that's so common, right? And I think when we look at attachment styles, which there's a ton of research on attachment theory, men tend to be more avoidant. But that goes back to how men are also raised. Don't express your emotions. Don't disclose what's going on for you. Mm-hmm. Use in intimate sex as a way to get some form of connection. Don't really connect with someone. And that's really kind of that attachment stance, is there's an avoidance of issues. There's an avoidance of what my needs are. And that really perpetuates also into that. Like, it is really heartbreaking that women have been put in this position because of kind of how also men have been put in a position that women bring up 80% of the issues. That's not a fair relationship. And I don't believe that's actually how it is. I believe that that's the result we get because men do not know how to share this stuff. And it feels threatening for them to say, no, you know what? I kind of actually need a hug. I actually need to talk to you about some of this stuff. Mm-hmm. Right. But our culture says, if you do that, you are not a man. And that's right. So much I mean, I want to swear a bunch right now, but
go ahead.
That's
bullshit.
Yeah, it is bullshit, right? It's so limiting, right? Because even there, the fragmentation, I can't be all of who I am, right? In real sacred sexuality is two mature adults who are fully wholeheartedly themselves come together and create that. Right? They work together with that. But when you're fragmented, when you've been cut off, when you've been shamed, when you've been kind of cut down in parts of who you are, how are you really going to have that deeply meaningful, sacred sexuality with each other? It's just not going to happen.
I don't know if you have seen this, but I have seen this often, is if the woman is the one to bring up the issues, that the man kind of, again, it's not his fault that he has this attitude, but it's like she's just a nag. It's like things aren't really that bad. She's just too sensitive or whatever.
Which is here's what's so fascinating about the research with this is that's what we see, right? That's the coping mechanism, is the dismissal of needs. But what we know is the person who dismisses other people's needs constantly does that to themselves too. And what's interesting is like an anxious attachment style, which is typically been put more towards women, is this kind of needs, being able to express that, kind of pursuing, chasing. The avoidant attachment style has this internal message that my needs aren't worth it. And so I'm not going to share them. I'm not going to express them. They're actually much more emotionally sensitive. And when we look at conflict conversations, kind of from Dr. Gottman's research, we know that 85% of the time, men are the ones who get flooded emotionally. They're highly sensitive. Men are very, very sensitive, but they're taught that they can't be emotional. They're taught that emotions are bad. They're toxic, but that's bullshit. Right. And that's where I think a lot of the problems lie, not only in the relationship, but also sexually too. Right.
I love that. that articulation of it as getting flooded. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about what that means? And
yeah, so we'll do a little Dan Siegel. So essentially, like if we imagine our brain has 3 different parts, we have a reptilian part. We'll just do 2 parts. We have our lizard brain and we have our human brain, right? And so this is our thinking brain. This is the part that when we have conflict conversations, when we use this, we're able to understand our partner. We're able to take their perspective. We have a sense of humor, and we're able to problem solve. When we get emotionally flooded, right, there's this felt sense of when our emotions become intense, our intellect becomes nonsense, right? And so this part of our brain that we use, the thinking part, flips open and we're left to our lizard brain, which is fight or flight or freeze, right? And so it's I'm going to fight you. I'm going to attack you. I don't even know what's going on right now, but you're a threat to me and I'm going to get the heck out of here or I'm going to shut down. And that's what we see is there's this helplessness in that shutting down, in that what we call stonewalling that occurs when the heart rate, like a person shuts down, and we call this behavior in the Love Lab stonewalling, right? And so it's essentially they turn into a stone wall. When we look inside about what's going on, their heart rates are over 100 beats per minute. They are so overwhelmed that they don't know what to do. Right. And the way they're trying to the reason they're shutting down is because I can't do anything. This isn't going to work. I'm just going to fail. I can't say anything right. And that's what we know is what's going on inside. And again, men do this a lot more because they don't have experiences talking about their emotions. They don't have experiences of engaging it. And if you go to even playgrounds, like little boys are like, okay, you got injured. Stop crying. Here's the ball. Let's go play. Girls will be like, whoa, what's wrong? Oh, you're sad? Like, tell us about that. There's a lot more emotional attunement, right? And not so much even in the playground for boys. And that's where when couples come together, even gay, lesbian, but if we're talking about a heterosexual couple, the man will dismiss the emotions or needs of the partner because he's been raised to dismiss those within himself. And that's where we get that reoccurring nasty cycle of conflict, because if he dismisses those needs, then she feels dismissed. Any issues that get brought up around that get dismissed, and it creates this nasty cycle where issues never get resolved. And then the couple grows more insecure. They have a lot more issues. Their sexuality starts to diminish and it eventually becomes non-existent. And unless that trajectory of the relationship changes, they're going to divorce or live in kind of this isolation in the same house.
Right. The roommate syndrome.
Yeah.
I have a couple of questions from that. One is, do you see the same dynamic in gay, lesbian, non-binary? Does one partner generally take on more masculine traits and therefore kind of aligns with that cultural definition of what masculine looks like?
Sometimes, but not as much. And one of the things that I think heterosexuals could really benefit from connecting and understanding the experience of lesbian or gay couples, or even bisexual couples, is or non-binary, is that they've, in doing that, because there's been so much cultural resistance and oppression and hate towards that, they've had to really explore their sexuality. They've had to really take ownership of some of that stuff. And so there is a lot more flexibility in the gender roles that we might separate in the relationship, and they're able to negotiate. And we see their ability to really actually have better conversations, be able to discuss things and less negative stuff. They still have issues. They still have, just as unhealthy relationships as heterosexual couples, but on average, they're slightly better because they're able to talk about this stuff, and because they've kind of been forced in a way, because of our culture, to really examine their sexuality or their gender or how they are perceived. And a lot of that time is because they've had to hide so much of that stuff, and they were in touch with how painful it was to have to be in the closet all the time, right? Whereas if we talk maybe about more of a heterosexual male, he might not be even aware of all the shit he shoved in his closet, all the stuff that he's never looked at because it was never safe for him to do.
Yeah. It's just so sad. It just
Heartbreaking.
it really is. It's just heartbreaking. And one thing I want the audience to realize is it's nobody's fault. I mean, it really isn't anybody's fault. And yet if we want to change this, we have to change the whole culture.
Right.
We can't just say it's enough for me and my partner to get out of this paradigm, but it's like we have to do whatever we can to change the whole culture, including when women raise their little boys.
Exactly. And that's what we see from the research too, is that boys are treated, I think, within the first 2 to 3 years differently than girls.
Yeah.
Even by the mothers. Absolutely.
Because she doesn't want to raise her son to be a pussy.
Mm-hmm.
Then she's going to not feel good about herself. I mean, it's just all so crazy.
Right. But that's the cultural lie.
Exactly.
If my son becomes attached to me, if my son is close to me, if he's emotional, he's going to be a weakling and he's not going to survive this world. Bullshit. He's actually going to thrive a lot more because he knows he has someone who's going to connect with him. He knows that someone finds him important. He knows that he can be all of himself, and he's going to be able to come to you as a resource when he struggles. How much more is he going to succeed in this world by having that? So much more. And like you talk about the societal change, and I 100% agree, but it starts with the couple, right? Mm-hmm. That's the smallest system in our society is a couple. Mm-hmm. And if each couple takes that responsibility, each partner takes responsibility to work on this within themselves, we will get a societal shift.
Absolutely.
That's where it starts. And that starts here. Yeah.
Yeah. And if we think of it as, I'm not just doing this for myself, but I'm doing this for a global shift in that dynamic, it can be a real motivator, I think, for people to do the work. The other question, you were just talking about how awesome it would be, if women take this on in raising their boys differently than they are taught by the culture.
That's one part.
That's one part, yeah, of course. But I had the question, you were talking about how men get flooded emotionally. Mm-hmm. And what can a woman do in that moment where her husband or partner or whatever is being flooded with emotions? And again, this doesn't just apply to men and women. I want to make that because
women get flooded too.
Yeah, people get flooded with emotions. What can their partner do when they see their partner getting flooded by emotions, and that partner may even be saying, "You're a bitch and I hate you," and blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. What can that partner do?
Well, I hope it doesn't get to that point, but I know that partners do get to that verbal abuse a little bit. But I think what you do is you stop talking. You need to realize that, right, again, they're not here. They're in life and death mode. And while it's just a conversation and you can see their face, or they might be engaging even slightly or not at all, take that as a cue to stop, because they're not going to be able to hear you. They can't take it in. And this is not a masculine problem. This is a biological problem, right? Their brain is not able to stay connected. And we know that from neuroscience. We know that from physiology. It just doesn't work. And when couples, what we do is I work with them on creating a timeout ritual, right? Or a flooding ritual where they have a signal. All right, we're taking a timeout, and they need 20 to 30 minutes separate from each other. That's the minimum, right? This neurotransmitter goes into that it gets activated in flooding, takes 20 minutes to get out of our bloodstream, right? And so if you give your partner even 5 minutes and then you try to start talking about it, they might go right back to being flooded again. So give them those 20 to 30 minutes and check in with them. All right. Hey, how you doing? Right. And what's interesting is we know from the research is taking that 20 to 30 minute break, it's almost like these partners get this brain transplant. All of a sudden there's humor again. They're able to understand each other. It's just this massive shift. But a lot of times, another thing that comes up is because of that flooding, we often, in our partner shutting down, we start to panic. Oh my God, they don't care about this issue. And so we take it very personally. That's another thing I think that's really important, is being able to separate that our partner's experience is different from ours, and that maybe they just need a break, and that maybe you do too, and that the relationship will actually be okay. And typically when I'm working with insecure partners, The avoidant partner will have that flooding kind of shut down. The anxious partner will feel this, and this again is also proven in the research, this sense of abandonment. Mm-hmm. He's left me. He's not here. I don't matter, right? It gets really personal. And so I work with couples on what's the reassuring statement, or I have them write love letters to each other that they go read during this break. That gives them some reassurance that there's security in the relationship. And so there's a lot of creative things to do with that, but understanding that this is a biological thing that we cannot change is the first thing that will help your relationship with that. I
love those very concrete tools. Those are so cool. I love that. And, I know that I'm 70 and you're 31, and I've been practicing this for decades in relationships and been not good at it for a long time, but I'm finally good at it. And, part of it is exactly what you're saying, is not taking it personally, remembering that he loves me. This is, in a way, one of the things I tell myself is, this isn't Richard. Mm-hmm. It's not. This is some other, interloper in his brain. This isn't Richard. And I think that is so helpful. It's for the person that's receiving that negativity to be able to say, this isn't my man or my woman or whatever, my partner. And I love the part that you're emphasizing too, to remind yourselves of the security of the love you share during those times. Whether you may get to the place where, when this happens with my husband and myself, we don't have to take a half an hour break anymore, because we've practiced so many times that we can usually get through it in 5 minutes by my saying, honey, I love you. Yep. How can I support you? But that requires me not taking it personally and thinking, what an asshole.
Right. Right.
If this is all people take away from this interview today, that to me, this is like one of the most powerful things that you can learn to do to enhance your sacred sexuality. Because like you said, it makes people feel safe if you trust that.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And the other thing that's really important too, right, for the person who does get flooded is they can't just use that as an excuse to avoid issues. Right? And that's another thing I see is they'll go, okay, I'm taking a time out, but they sweep that issue under the rug, and it's something that's important to their partner. Right. And then in that partner, the other partner who's trying to let them take the break won't feel safe enough. They're like, well, now the issue's done. It's never going to be talked about. So the other partner also has a responsibility in going back and saying, we need to talk about this. This is important. If this is important to you, it's also important to me. And that's foundational to creating a really secure relationship.
Can you talk about that for a moment, Kyle? Because I think this goes back to the women bring up 80% of the issues, and then men feel like they're nagged and that they're constantly having to pander and cater to the woman, which creates incredible resentment. Mm-hmm. How do you work with people? And you just said it, if it's important to you, it's important to me. But how do the partner that is avoidant, how do they own that this is my issue too? Mm-hmm. It isn't just that I'm doing it for the other person.
Right. So I talk a lot about kind of the relationship. Right, that the relationship has to work, and both partners' needs have to be on par with each other, right? And so if something's important to your partner, you also need to take that as really important, because if they get neglected, the relationship gets neglected, and you get neglected as a result, right? And so we talk a little bit about that. One of the things that also comes up with avoidance is they will sometimes over-cater, where the partner will be like, as soon as I start to talk about doing that, they're like, okay, whatever my partner's needs are, I'm going to do exactly what they want. And then next week they're resentful, they're pissed off, they're angry. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, of course you are, because you didn't bring what you needed to, right? And this is the part about having trust in a relationship, is this felt sense that we can take the needs that we have and we can build a bridge to each other, right? And that requires sharing what's going to work for me. Okay, you need me to help soothe you. Well, I need to take a 30-minute break, and then I will come back and I'll hold you for 15, 20 minutes. Does that work for you? No, like I need us to go on a walk too. Okay. How about I take, 30 minutes, we go on a quick walk, but then after that, I need another like this, right? Does that work for you? Right? Being able to find that win-win is really important. But what I find with a lot of couples, particularly where there's flooding come in, is there's this almost internal belief system that that's never going to be achieved. And that's also another problem too. And if we talk about sexuality, right? Oh, your needs are my needs. Like there's this fight almost a little bit for it too. And I know even women I've worked with, they have this pressure that I have to get aroused really quickly. I have to be turned on really quickly. I can't get my needs to take my time and kind of relish in what's going on in my body and me being turned on. And so again, right, how do we slow down? How do we make it safe for both partners' needs and consider those in trying to find a recipe to be successful with each other?
I think I don't know if it's another way of looking at it, but I want to run it by you, is that because you're saying that, she needs to be held and he needs to take a break. Again, I'm referring back to my own marriage. When we first got together, my husband would say, you have a lot more need for affection than I do. Mm-hmm. And, that would make me feel rejected. And then we would get into this spiral. But it's like, after doing a lot of work, mm-hmm. I think the real resolution for us is for him to recognize that his needs for affection are at least as great as mine are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And that's what I was trying to get at when I said, if you think of it as her needs and I'm going to meet her needs, rather than saying, what is for the highest good of all? Do I really have that need also? And I'm just denying it.
Mm-hmm. And that's just, and I would 100% agree with that. I think there is a lot of denial, right? And that's, again, the avoidance of it. I'm going to avoid my needs. I don't have that stuff. And again, highly underneath that face, that mask that the avoidance wears, there's a lot of needs, and there's a lot of things that the learned behavior that goes into that mask that's weared is my needs are not important. I don't get them met. So there's no point in me trying to get them met. And so I'm going to view myself as self-sufficient, that I'm independent and that I don't have any needs. And that's BS. That's not human, right? We are wired for connection. We're wired for togetherness. And so, yes, I think to a degree, if you see your partner's needs as overwhelming, right, there's probably unmet needs you have, right? Men need to be held. Men need hugs. Men need kisses. Men need all that stuff, right? And it's lovely. And sometimes even the men might be much more in need of affection than the women too, right? And there is sometimes a slight difference in needs for affection or the different types or love languages, mm-hmm. right? But I think it is really important is if we look at this, a relationship, the environment and that family culture, the couple culture you're creating, if you do have the high levels of affection, if you're making out, if you're holding hands, if you're cuddling, if you're saying, I love you and you mean it, we know you're going to have a much more passionate sex life because it's not just the emotion or the physical connection doesn't just happen in the bedroom. It happens throughout the relationship. Right. And that's something also really important to remember.
I completely agree with that. And do you embrace the concept that basically men and women on a fundamental level need the same things?
Yeah. I mean, they're humans. I think, and again, this comes back to the patriarchal societal lies that are told that we're so different. No, not really.
Yeah.
The differences that are between us are really small. Right.
I completely agree with that. I mean, the whole idea, and I don't mean to criticize any other, kind of counseling philosophy, but the whole idea that, women are from Venus and men are from Mars, I just, that only helps to describe how we've been brainwashed.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I mean, it's bullshit. We're all from Earth.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that if we can remember that our basic need is for intimacy, that is like our most basic need is for connection. And we've learned all these different artificial overlays, but essentially we're just longing for connection, which is sacred sexuality.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. It is really, I mean, we're wired for connection. As human beings, we thrive in connection, right? And we know that from watching children, like developmentally, the kids that get affection, the kids that get attention, the kids that get parents who emotionally coach them become emotionally intelligent. And emotional intelligence is a much larger indicator of success later in life than just basic intelligence, right? IQ. We know that because they're much more emotionally resilient, right? And then if we look at people, children who are in foster systems or who don't get that attention, right? They develop a whole host of disorders, psychological, physical, health issues, right? And it's heartbreaking, but that's because of the system and how it's set up, and because we're so focused on our achievements or how we got to be better than other people, we really miss that, right? And I don't think there's I love Stan Tacken, who's a couples therapist who I really admire. He talks about in couples and just in life, there's no angels, there's no devils, there's humans, right? And really starting to realize that, and that the person that we see as a devil or we see as an angel, right? They present that way probably because they learned that. That's how they were treated. And we often treat other people how we were treated. And just like when your partner dismisses your needs, well, they probably were raised in a family that their needs were never seen or honored, and how heartbreaking that is. And it's so intense that for some avoidant people, men or women, that it was so harmful for them that even at an early age, they said, I will never, ever take a risk to share my needs with someone again. And that's a vow they hold on to for the rest of their lives.
That's so true and so incredibly painful. And I love that you're really highlighting again the need to deal with the underlying issues, and they are often old traumas that people would say, I don't want to deal with the past. I want to learn how to please her now. And it's like, if there's one important thing, people can learn from you, you've got to look at the root problems.
Yeah. And the past is never the past. It's just not. It's not how our brains work. We have a part of our brain that when it remembers things, it doesn't time code it. Right. And this is where people get emotionally triggered, right? When someone gets emotionally triggered, right, the past is now in the present, right? The past wound, that injury is now being touched in the present, right? And that's a signal that there's trauma that we need to maybe explore and deal with. Right? And that's, I think, another part. Okay, when someone's getting flooded, what's the trigger for them? Why do they get so elevated? Why are the emotions so intense that biologically they've lost the human part of their brain? There's a lot there.
There is a lot there. And you need help to get to that and to unpack that and to realign that and heal it and so forth. And that's where we come in, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And there's a lot of great helping professionals out there. And I think it's finding people, again, who align with this view. But just as you said, there's also a lot of other professionals who are going to tell you men are from Venus or Mars and women are from Venus, whatever that phrase is. Right. So you also have to be conscious of that.
Yes, I love that. I always tell people that choosing a coach, counselor is really like it's just as important and just as intimate as choosing a life partner.
Absolutely.
Because if you're not in alignment and you don't feel safe with that person, you're not going to go anywhere. No. So please tell us if you have any. I know you just gave an incredible parting thought in terms of you've got to get to the root of it, or you are not going to get what you want out of your relationship. Anything else you want to say in summary, and then tell us about your free gift?
Yeah, I think a lot of things, I think the one biggest thing that you could do for yourself and for your partner is to be really curious, right? If you could stay curious about what goes on for me that I get triggered that my partner doesn't do the dishes, right? And that I criticize, or I tell them that they are a 12-year-old boy who never learned how to be an adult, right? That is such a brutal punch to the gut emotionally. Right. And so understanding, wow, like, okay, it seems like there's something important here for me, and to honor that. And just also, if you're the partner that shuts down, what goes on for you that causes you to shut down? What are the unexplored parts? What are the parts that you haven't gotten in touch with? And how can you be curious about what causes you to be that way, or what causes you to see your partner as a nag, right? Because that's your perception. That's the glasses you wear to see in your relationship. And one of the things we know is that couples who really struggle in the relationship is they wear what we might call shit covered glasses. Right? They don't see each other well, right? And what we know from couples who do have a healthy relationship is they do kind of have a rose colored glasses. They tend to see their partner in a really positive light. And that's something that's really important too, but also not to be so rose colored that we don't actually see the red flags in relationships too. And that's something also to remember. But kind of on a final note for sacred sexuality, I think just being really conscious of your needs and really trying to slow down and really get in touch with your body. Like if that's the one thing you take away, right? A flooding, emotions, that's all body work. It's all somatic. And I think if people can get more in touch with what goes on in here, they will feel a much more heart-to-heart connection with their partner.
And be curious about what they notice. Mm-hmm. I love that is notice what's going on in your body and then be curious about why.
Yeah. And so that'll lead to the gift, my Intimacy 5 challenge, right? These 5 challenges that are really intimate, and they're designed that way to make you face the uncomfortable feelings that come up. Right? Like one of them is eye gaze, and we're going to gaze at your partner and really try to soften your gaze and get emotionally connected with them. And every couple I've worked with, even myself, there's this like, oh my God, my partner's seeing me. Like we start getting anxious and worried. And then also like a hug. I ask couples to do this 4-minute hug where they hold each other, really hold each other and just embrace in that. And a lot of people are like, as soon as that 4 minutes is up, they like jolt away like a lightning bolt has struck them. Right? Or they have this like, oh my God, this is so uncomfortable. Be curious about that. And so that's what the Intimacy 5 challenge will help you kind of explore is what comes up for me emotionally and even in my thoughts that happens when I'm really close and intimate with someone. And if you're curious with that, you're on a path to start kind of healing some stuff that's there.
I love that. I know people are going to get so much from that. How can people find you, Kyle, on all the different platforms?
Yeah, I think the main place is just my website, kylebenson.net. So you'll find a lot of articles there. I think there's close to 200 articles. And that's a place where I share a lot of my stuff. And then I also have a weekly email newsletter that you can sign up for there as well.
You know, that's one thing I wanted to comment on is your website is so fantastic because you have so much information. You're such a resource. You are so generous about sharing your wisdom and where you got it, from other experts. So I really want to encourage people to go to kylebenson.net and take in all of that wisdom that you offer.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
So thank you so much, Kyle. I mean, you're just a doll to me. You're so smart and you're so wise, and you've really, it just makes me want to cry. You have taken yourself on at such a depth for such a young person, and you have so much to offer other people because of it. You're such a blessing to the world, and we need more of you.
Thank you.
You're helping to change the whole conversation among men and couples that is so vital to changing the pain about sacred sexuality. So I want to thank you so much, not just for being here today, but for all the work that you do for all of us every day.
Thank you. I'm almost going to cry. Thank you. It's so sweet. And I really appreciate you doing this. I mean, it's just as you said, like you do this right? You do this to really help people explore this stuff and help them get in touch with their sexualities, but also who they are to become wholehearted. And I think our sexuality is really core to that. And I'm really, really grateful that I got to have this conversation with you today.
Well, thank you. It's been a real pleasure and an honor.
Thank you. Same here.
Thanks.